Hi, everybody. I'm Sohail Parker. I'm the CEO of Environmental Protection Services Company, India, in short, EPSCO India. And we are the leaders in India as far as asbestos abatement goes, asbestos surveys, asbestos management. And we've been active in this field in India for over a decade now. And it has been an endeavor to educate this market, maybe not as developed as the West. Maybe the compliances are not as strict, but yes, it's happening slowly, taking shape, and laws are being formed, are being discussed. And in this regard, I had thought of inviting a professional from the US, where the government has passed a complete ban on use of asbestos in any field. And that gentleman I'd like to welcome is Dr. Kenneth Balbi. Has over 35 years of experience in the environmental space. He has worked in the field of and lectured nationally, internationally on environmental toxins, their effects, testing, and abatement technology. He is also director in Alpha Training International, otherwise known as ATI. I myself have done my training there, uh, and got myself qualified with the US certification with him. And he's been developing international leaders in this environmental health and safety field since 1988. Dr. Kenneth is also serving as an educational board member at the American Public Health Association, actively contributing in policy and advocacy. He is also a professor in universities there, teaching students on the same field and educating them. A doctor who has dedicated his life in setting new standards and protocols for health and safety, especially with environmental toxins. Yes, Dr. Kenneth Balbi, welcome on board. Let's start our discussion today and try to educate what we could do in India, what we could replicate from you and learn from you. Dr. Kenneth, to start with, I would like you to tell us, why did you take up asbestos abatement or management so strongly and advocate it so strongly in your country? And how has been the experience and the way you have conveyed this message across to the common man?
The message is quite clear, and it's been clear for hundreds of years. Asbestos is a deadly product. It's a chemical that's killed millions of people over thousands of years. What's unfortunate is industries pressured countries, governments, to use a product knowingly and willingly that they knew was a health hazard for profit versus health. And unfortunately, many people have paid for it, and many people will continue to pay for that in the future.
Any historical data you could give us about went across how the laws came into place and how far have they succeeded in reducing the risk?
Well, the laws came into place because of one president in the United States. His name was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon actually was the first president to create two agencies in the United States in 1970, OSHA and EPA. Nixon was known for many other things, unfortunately, and his fame for protecting the environment, protecting workers in the United States, fell second to the issues he had in government. But we know that he was a great influence. By creating EPA, he protected air, water, the soil, the general population of the United States. But EPA was also put in response to hazardous waste and hazardous waste materials. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, protected workers. And people always thought it was just certain groups of workers. It's people that work. It doesn't matter the industry. If it's construction, maritime, general industries, there's standards out there to protect workers. The big issue, too, is enforcing these standards. Because these agencies, although the United States is a developed country and has resources, the resources may not be allocated where they really should be a lot of times. And secondary is always environment and health, unfortunately. So Nixon put into play EPA, OSHA. And the first acts that were put in were looking at asbestos. And the first ban that was put in was 1973, where they banned spray-on insulation. There's different theories as to why that ban came into play. There was a legal case in New Jersey. The individual was named LaGrange, and he got sick. And he basically was dying from asbestos-related disease from an industry he worked in. And he got a young lawyer and a young physician as the expert to work with him. And that young lawyer decided to play the case a little differently. Instead of suing the company he worked for, he sued Johns Manville, the company that produced the product. And Mansville had been sued before, but making millions, paying out thousands, not a big problem. So Johns Manville was prepared for another case. They had their lawyers from Manhattan going to New Jersey, and the physician, the young physician, was also from West Orange, New Jersey. His name was Irving J. Selikoff, as I call him, the father of the asbestos worker, because he did the studies that we use even today and reference today for asbestos-related diseases. We know, thanks to Dr. Selikoff, that working with asbestos compared to a layperson or asbestos workers, 5 times more likely to develop lung cancer. If you smoke alone, you're 10 to 22 times more likely to develop lung cancer. So in reality, when you look at the product, asbestos is safer than smoking. But the issue is that a lot of these people that work with this industry do both. They smoke and they work in the industry. That's a synergistic effect or multiplicity, because smoking relaxes the cilia, thereby letting particles go into your lung. The effect is 50 to 90 times the risk of lung cancer. So Selikoff, who eventually did all these studies and published these studies, and now at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City, the Irving J. Selikoff Center is named after him. He really led the charge when we look at asbestos. Although there were many before him in the early 1900s, 1800s. But for our generation, he is the father of it. The lawyer did one thing. An expert's as good as his credibility in court. Selikoff testified. But the lawyer did one major thing. He brought in Lagrange to testify. And when Lagrange came to testify, he was on a ventilator.
Yep, the jury would have gone his way.
Immediately, the jury was on his side. Johns Manville knew they lost. They settled. I forgot the sum. It was in the $60,000 or $70,000. But again, this was a while back. That was a lot of money. From my understanding, and again, you read the different histories, Johns Manville was the first company in the United States to request from the US government a bailout. They wanted money because they were losing money. That is one of the histories or potential histories of why the United States government banned spray-on insulation in 1973. Not because it was bad, but because Johns Manville asked for a bailout, which is sad because it really should be for help. Many Americans believe that we banned asbestos in the 70s. 1978 was the second ban, but it really wasn't. We know that in the 70s, after they proved, and it was proven in the 50s, 1955, that asbestos was associated with cancer, and in 1960 with mesothelioma, that when they installed the Clean Air Act, they established the Clean Air Act by the EPA. Years later, OSHA grew more protective in the decades to come. In 79, they issued a notice, the EPA, that was called TSCA, or part of TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act. And the whole thing was to completely ban asbestos in the United States in the 70s. It was a beautiful thing. But through pressure from Canada to the US, from pressure of the asbestos industry to the US, the ban was pulled. And under the Reagan administration, they literally halted the efforts. 10 years later, in 1989, after a $10 million study that was over 100,000 pages, EPA granted a phase out and a ban of more than 90% of the products containing it. Excellent. But in 1991, it was overturned. Industry pressure, right? The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals threw out parts of the EPA ban and said it failed with least burdensome alternatives, whatever that means. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just a scientist. When you've got a product that you've proven is dangerous, it should be totally banned. Or at least phase it out slowly, but not phase it out or stop the phase out. It was deleterious, the overturn of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So today, back then, I'll say, less than a dozen products were quote unquote banned. In 2002, Senators Boxer and Murray, Washington State and California, tried to push through more of a ban through Congress repetitively, but it was blocked once again because industry still had power. Now you have to understand, in the United States, we stopped producing asbestos in 2003. We went to Canada, to the north of us, and we bought their asbestos. That's what we were using till 2011 when they closed their mines. Then we went to Brazil, and Brazil supposedly closed their mines in 2019. Then we went to Russia, and that's where we were importing it from. So we know that based on this history, the ban didn't work until Obama. Obama signed into effect a law. It was called the Frank Laudenberg, who was a senator. And he reenacted or he activated TSCA again in 2016. At the same time, Vice President Biden put in a cancer moonshot program, all working in conjunction. The cancer moonshot was basically an aggressive effort to decrease cancer in the United States, which we know is 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people, asbestos being one of those products. So they moved forward with these laws, the new TSCA Act. And Obama's plan was a two-phase plan that was followed through during the Trump administration and followed through into the Biden administration. During the Trump administration, 16 products were banned, even though there was pushback. But 16 products were banned. And now during the Biden administration, it's what we call the final ban for the chlor-alkali industry. The chlor-alkali industry uses asbestos in their filters. Asbestos legally still can be used in the United States, what people don't realize. And I'll explain that in a second. But the Biden administration pushed through this ban, but it's only one of 6 regulated products in the country and 7 in the state of New York. Chrysotile. Chrysotile asbestos is banned, but amphitrite, termalite, actinolite, crucidolite, amosite, and vermiculite are not banned. People say, well, it's a start. The start should have been, we're banning everything, not one of the products. And I know what the answer is going to be. Well, 95% of construction used chrysotile. It's a great move forward. Yeah, but that 5%, that's the real bad asbestos, because it's not the serpentine fiber that the chrysotile is, that loves water and will absorb it when wet. It's the one that repels the water, the one that stays easily airborne, the amphiboles. So when you look at a product, it's a great move forward. I don't say not. It's not a complete move. It's a small step, but they have 5 years, the chlor-alkali industry in the United States, to change their process. Even though for years there's been other processes to filter this chlorine, amongst other things. So the ban, it's a good move. I don't take it back. It's better than nothing. But you have to change one law in the United States too, the Clean Air Act, because under the Clean Air Act, subsection M, it specifically states, and this is from the EPA, first line is, don't put anything greater than 1% asbestos in products. The second line basically says, if you're going to put more than 1%, let us know 20 days before. Tell us the location and tell us how you're going to keep it from going out into the environment. So my question is, I'm not an attorney, but is there really a ban? Again, we have to remember, even greater than 1%, are we stating that 1% or less asbestos is not hazardous? Because we know that health-based, we have a theory of the one fiber theory. All it takes is one fiber to cause disease. And can we get rid of everything? The answer is no, because asbestos is also naturally occurring. It's on the surface of the earth. And there are countries in the world that have it on the surface of the earth. And people walk through it. So we know that there's still some exposure. But that's a natural exposure, not a man-made, a man-created for-profit exposure. In the United States, there's locations in Nevada called Henderson, Nevada, which is about 15 miles outside of Las Vegas. And it's a large natural occurring asbestos field. And people go biking through it, dirt biking, ATVing. It's an outdoors place. And it's one of the places where it has the highest levels of asbestos-related deaths not associated with industry, to my understanding. Okay. Again, there's lots of studies out there, and every study, you have to read it very carefully. What we know is currently about 125 million people in the world are exposed to asbestos at the workplace. In the US, it's 1.3, they say. In 2004, asbestos-related lung cancers, mesothelioma, asbestosis, from occupational exposures resulted in over 107,000 deaths and 1.5 million disability-adjusted life years. That's one too many. We know there's several thousand deaths can be attributed to other asbestos-related diseases too. But the issue with the industry is the only things we directly always relate with asbestos are asbestosis, the fibrotic scarring of the lung, and mesothelioma. Because lung cancer, the GI cancers, the uterine cancer could always be other things. But if you look at how the fiber circulates through the body, the fiber circulates through your lymphatic system. The fiber circulate through your circulatory system. So my question is, as a scientist, could it be that other cancers that we diagnose as one thing could be attributed to asbestos? If anybody says no, then they're not being honest. So, the history is amazing of asbestos.
Have you heard anything about India on asbestos in the US? Any talk about what's happening in India?
Of course there is. India is the largest importer of asbestos from Russia. You guys are helping the Russian economy incredibly well. It's a massive amount of material that you're importing. From our understanding, you're putting it into your block. You're putting it into everything in construction. You're still using it in brake pads, which we still do too. But they want to phase that out. Diaphragms, gaskets. The product in what it can do, asbestos, is amazing. But the issue is, it's deadly. And if you look at the Phase 2 Act, we can still legally use asbestos. If you read the fine line, we can still use it in NASA for aerospace, which again makes sense because it's such a high heat shield. 700 to 1,900 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe, give or take. That's a phenomenal heat shield. To me, it's educate. Educate people, tell them the truth. Let them make the judgment, always.
I remember when you had the Twin Tower collapse in the terrorist attack, there was a lot of asbestos that spread right across the city. Is there an impact? Do people still feel the impact of that?
Of course. Right now, we lost, unfortunately, on 9/11, 3,000 plus persons. And again, that was, 2001. We're talking 2024 now, 23 years later. And right now, the estimates are we've lost more lives of first responders than we did on 9/11. Over 4,000 people have died with what the asbestos, and I shouldn't say the asbestos-related syndromes, but the first responders from being on that pile. Because we know there was more than just asbestos there too. There was many chemicals that were burning. And people were breathing these things in. So, 9/11, again, was a massive impact. But even the United States and New York City is huge. I live in New York City, but in one of the boroughs. And 4 days after, I lived about 13 miles from the city, we could smell the towers burning. Yeah. And I told my wife, close the windows. She was like, what's that? I said, that's the towers. Close the windows. And when you look at a situation like that, they said and Manhattan is an island. So the tip of the island, if you were south of what they called Houston Street, you're in the group. If you were north, on the other side of the river, to Brooklyn, Queens, or to New Jersey, you're not part of the group. You're not part of the package, which is ridiculous because you look at an asbestos fiber A single fiber is so aerodynamic that if you put it into a vacuum, I think it was a 6-foot vacuum, it would take 8 hours from a 6-foot vacuum for that fiber to hit the bottom. That's how aerodynamic these things are. So to limit saying asbestos fiber release is only going to go certain distance, that's not real either. That's like us saying that lead and leaded gasoline only affected within the point source, within the area where the lead gasoline was emitted. We know that 35% of leaded gasoline went atmospheric, and leaded gasoline is a heavier particle, definitely, than asbestos. So asbestos, again, it has to be done globally. There's more than 50 countries that have banned it. Why are we so late in the race? Even the United States, for being one of the most advanced countries, we're late in the race. Australia banned it in 2011, I believe, and they're an eradication program. The UK has just banned it as well. And they're going to eradicate. They're getting rid of it. But they said it's going to take them 40 to 50 years or 60 years. If the United States really took that stance, it would be great, but it would take 100 plus years, I think, to remove this thing. Because a good portion of the construction in the United States used it. Germany itself, 80% of their concrete has it. Again, the product is everywhere. Do we really need the product? That's the other question. Can we substitute it? What are we substituting with? Or just pull it out completely?
We have a severe challenge in India where we do not have enough regulated space or landfill to take this quantity of abatement, which is present already in the current infrastructure, buildings, and take it away from demolition sites or from such locations. And it's going to be a huge challenge. Now we must be doing hardly 1% of buildings where we're actually following the procedure and removing it to a regulated site. Just imagine if even 20% starts following the standards. Where do we take all this? And how do we create the landfill sites?
Well, the creation of the site is digging a hole, unfortunately, or using an existing one, like a quarry that's no longer in use. There's always simple answers to the question. The simplicity of it is if you want to see it. Are there quarries within India that have been used for whatever type of mining that are discontinued? Okay, put it back to where it came from. You put it back to the ground. In the United States, every day, at the end of the day, those quarries get 6 inches of soil put on top. Now, one of the things with the way we pack the material in the United States is we double bag it. It's 6 mil bags, 6 mil polyethylene bags. But one of the catches is you have to take the air out of the bag to drain out any excess air before they do what they call the gooseneck, which is they tie the end, bend it over, twist it, so that in case that wetted material, and it's always wet, the material has to be wet, wetted material were to flip, it would be very difficult for the liquid to get out. So if you do that, you take the air out of every bag, you're definitely decompressing a lot of space. You're adding more ability for space. Leaving air in bags, because when I train people with the gooseneck, I tell them, you stick your hand in the bag. You're wearing a glove, you're wearing a suit, you're wearing a respirator, and you vacuum seal that bag the best you can, because that's space. Okay? And when you do it, if you put all those bags and lay them down and put 6 inches back, yeah, you might have a better quality of space or more space available. We, again, in the United States, it goes out to different states. And these states accept the regulated asbestos-containing material and they bury it. It's a distance from the cities, right? They're distances. They're traveled out. They're not next to or in major cities. Like you wouldn't put a regulated asbestos-containing landfill in the middle of Mumbai, by any means. It's got to be outside. From my travels to India when I was younger, I remember a lot of land in India, a lot of farmland. Um, it was a beautiful experience. There is land. The question is, where do you want to do it? And how do you want to do it? I would use mines. I would use existing quarries that are no longer in use. That I think is the best thing, because you're not making an effort to dig something up. That's the first thing I would use. And I would cap it. I mean, Canada, after they closed the Jeffreys mines and, the mines in Quebec, in Asbestos, Quebec, which is now Val des Sons, the Valley of Sources, they were monitoring the air around it, and they were having landslides because it was an open air mine, right? An open pit mine. And to my belief, those results were coming out high when the land was sliding, those terraces were sliding. They would create asbestos in the air. So what did they do? They let the quarry fill with water. Now it's this beautiful looking lake surrounded by a fence and observation decks, but it's, still there, but less of a risk. We always try to answer things complicatedly with a complex answer. No, the expression is keep it simple. A quarry, put the bags, put a little, your 6 inches every night and build it up. India is the largest population in the world as of today. It's a large country too. So it's a lot of material.
Densely populated.
What?
It's very densely populated.
Yeah.
Number of people per square kilometer is very high.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But again, where do you put this stuff? I mean, do you ship it back to Russia? Say, hey, thanks for the material. Let's send it back to Russia. Let's send it back to Canada, where we got it from. Remember, before the mines in Canada closed, India was the largest purchaser of Canadian asbestos. And what did it take to make these things happen? The media. That famous video, Canada's Dirty Little Secret, right? That was eye-opening to the industry. And then there was a comedian here in the United States named Jon Stewart that did a bit on the town of asbestos. And it was very, very sadly humorous, but well done. Make people aware. Tell
You would
people
love to
the
get
truth.
this material which you have of how people have educated people in the United States, and you would try to make Indian versions of something similar in the local language, so to get the word out, and maybe where people start putting pressure on the government to implement regulations. Yeah, the regulations I'm following today are the U.S. regulations. I'm following the U.S. CFR codes, the OSHA standards, AHERA, US EPA Act. We follow it because we don't have a solid standard in India, and for it to become for something to be adopted, so we need to do a lot of advocacy within the country. The only people we do work with are MNCs who are liable abroad, because there's no liability in India.
I mean, to get the message out is really simple. To me, it's public service announcements. If you can get on television, and you don't want to make them long, 45 seconds. Send the message out and repeat it. It's a repeated sending a message.
Who will fund it? You have
But
the US EPA who had a budget to fund these things. In India, we are at a disadvantage.
I know. And like you said, I've lectured around the world, and a lot of the countries that we go lecture in, including India, it's basically tell us your standards, tell us your experience. And we do, like respiratory protection. When you look around the world, they still will use, in certain situations, a filtering face piece respirator for asbestos. In the United States, we cringe at that. It's got to be a minimum of a half mask HEPA filter. And when I've gone to other countries to train, they pull out their, oh yeah, we're ready to train. And here's our respirator. And I'm like, oh no, you will not use that. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, at minimum, you have to get me a half mask with HEPA filters. Oops. A half mask with, HEPA filters. And they're like, but those are expensive. I go, and what's human life worth? The reality is we lead in certain things. I believe our NIOSH studies on respiratory protection are excellent compared to other recommendations that we have. The PPE is key. When you look at PPE, it should be, and I will use this word, a God-given right to get it when you work in an industry that's hazardous. In the US, our standards under OSHA, the 29 CFR 1910s, 132 to 138, which are the PPE standards, from eye protection to, boots from head to toe, they're good standards. But even that has limits to it when you look at it. Could you improve upon it, etc.? Even when you train, these contractors that you train, they're for profit. I come from a hospital setting. We used to be nonprofit organizations. We got funding, we did what we could do, and we pushed forward because of that. These companies are for profit. And if they can save money on using certain PPE, they will. And that's not the way it works. The standard should be strictly written, stating, you will use this, you will use this, you will use this. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
It's just not the half face mask or full face class 50, 100. It's how you use it too. I mean, fit test. Not many contractors are even doing a fit test, just giving the mask, okay, put it on and go out. And
well,
training is a big issue.
Yeah, even issuing the masks without a fit test, without a medical, that's a danger too. People believe, humans have a price. Life has a price. Life is priceless. Everybody comes to this earth with a task, with a job. When your job is complete is when you leave. But don't treat people poorly. Treat people with respect and dignity. We always have to understand each other clearly. And not treating a worker right, not showing respect to that worker for what they do, that's something wrong too. Because even the companies that they work for, that worker is making them a profit. Give that worker the respect and rights and equipment they need. If they need boots, they should be wearing the right boots. If they need the proper hand protection, give them the right gloves, not the thin ones that'll tear, that'll still get hurt. Give them the proper training. I mean, training to me is key. My parents always said to me, and I was just with my mother and my aunt yesterday, who are 97 and 99 years old and still work, by the way, because they want to. They always said to me, in life, things come and go. People come and go. Money comes and goes. But the one thing that we can give you in your life that will never be taken away from you is your education.
Yep.
And that's what we have to do. We have to educate people. Education is so important. And it's repeated education, retrain. Because if we don't practice it, we forget it. And that's a problem too. I review before my lectures because maybe something new came out. Maybe there's something I don't know. Some of the stuff doesn't change either. Maybe we should stop doing research on certain things and put the money elsewhere, but promote from what we know. Asbestos is a product that we've known about for thousands of years, because when we lecture about it, we talk about the slaves that mined it and the illnesses of disease, the illness of lungs, right? The disease of the lungs. But again, I'm medically trained. I know it could have been tuberculosis, right? Consumption, because it's very similar when you look at it. And life expectancy was only 40 years of age. We're living longer now. So now we'll see these diseases develop more so. Germany, I remember many years ago, to work with asbestos, you had to be 40 years of age because they took into consideration that latency period from time of exposure till time of a developed disease. But now you can be 18 because they also bowed down to pressure. Sometimes you have to stand firm in your beliefs, right or wrong. If you're protecting human health, you have to stand firm. As my mentor, Dr. Rosen, said, at some point in your career, you sacrifice it to do what's right.
What we need in India is to learn from 50 years of what the US did. And maybe with the way media is running with Google and the way websites, do that in 5 years as far as knowledge and education. Uh, Gain on the time, learn from what you guys have done. And we've had such sorry cases in India where a worker who goes home every day with dust, asbestos dust on his clothes, goes home, there's an infant child sleeping there. The wife takes the clothes and kind of uh, gives it a jerk, and the child breathes it in. And by the time the child goes to 25, an infant is infected, has never worked on an asbestos, just because of the lack of education. Nobody told him.
Yeah.
And
Again, that right there, that story that you've told me, we have it here in Libby, Montana, the vermiculite mines, one of the largest contaminated asbestos sites in the United States, if not the largest, with the most fame. That right now CDC is monitoring the long-term effects to the families, because the fathers exactly would do that. They go into the mine, they come home, the wife would shake out the clothes, they contaminate the house, they would get sick. Eventually, the kids are getting sick now. And this is years down the line already. What every country needs to do, it's not just India, what every country needs to do is quite simple. They need to look at the history in a matter of 15 minutes and say, wow, look what happened in Canada. Look what happened in the United States. Look what happened in Australia. Look and go, wow, it's the same story. Why are we going to repeat history? Why are we going to take 10, 20, 30 years to implement our regulations? We have to do it now.
exactly, we should use the pre-existing research and data available to us. The toxicity and effect on all humans is just the same. Instead of wasting time on creating new data, take it on. Let's not reinvent the wheel and implement it in India too. I agree with you totally.
But I hate to say that as a research scientist, as I was trained as one, we always said it's only the US data that's important because we can't trust data outside the United States. No. China has tons of data. Australia has tons of data. Europe has tons of data. India has data, not tons of it, but has data. And what you need to do is, we don't need to spend millions of dollars to study. What we need to do is spend millions of dollars to educate.
Right.
There was a store here in the United States, in New York, that was called Sims. And it was a men's clothing store. And what Sims would do is they would go to stores and they would buy their suits that they weren't selling. And they were Pierre Cardin, Christian Dior, all these name brand, fashion designers. And what they would do is they would take the inside of the suit and they would cut out the label. So it wouldn't say who it was, but they'd hang the suit and they'd sell the suit for, I think it was $125. And these were $300, $400, $500 suits back then. And they'd have them on a rack. And as the week went by, the price dropped and dropped and dropped to, I think, like $60. And my father took me there, and I remember. And Sims had a commercial. It was Sims, an educated consumer is our best customer. And I use that in my training today, to this day. An educated consumer is the best customer. An educated worker is going to be the best worker. An educated supervisor that is permitted to supervise properly is the best supervisor. And a company that's educated is that best company. Now, to get there, the government has to be educated too, not forced by industry or pressured by industry and lobbyists to use a product that's deadly just for profit. We saw it with lead, we've seen it with asbestos, and we see it with many, many things that we have in our industry. The microplastics, all these things, the PCBs, we know they're bad. Why? Why do you not remove it? Because it's going to be costly? Yeah, but somebody already made a profit on that.
Plastics has done well in India. The ban on plastics and the kind of plastics that has been very actively. A lot of people have been talking about it. But asbestos is one area which has been totally ignored. And we hope that we can communicate and get new ideas from you on how to educate uh, people in our country and maybe somehow find a way to influence them. Though we don't have budgets, but there are a lot of other platforms that we can talk on now with the new with the way media and everything is going, which are free to use. So we thought we'd make some more videos. We thought we'd spread higher viewership, get more influencers to advocate it. We were planning to do this, and I think we'll need a lot of your help and support while we do that, because you guys have done it. We are starting now.
That's what we're here for. We're here to help each other. You know, we all learn from each other's experience. And that's why I say every morning when I wake up, if I learned something today, it was a good day.
I've done my training at AGI.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've done my house power there. I've done my supervisor contractor. I've done my designer planner, my inspector.
Well, again, you have to have a passion when you do things. It's like a hobby. You have to have a passion. I've been doing this actually for 37 years, and I'm not bored of it. It's not a job.
I believe you're an industrial hygienist too. You're an industrial hygienist. You're also a medical doctor.
Yes. I don't practice. I did research.
So a lot of hats you're wearing. So we hope to see you in India soon. Maybe we'll find a way to do that. Let's
That
see
would
how
be
we go
wonderful.
about it. It's been lovely talking to you, Ken.
It's been lovely talking to you.
And let's see what we can do. We'll be in touch. If you have any ideas to help us out, we're always ready to learn.
Well, thank you. I'm here to teach, and I'm here to learn too. So I would love to be part of the impact in India. And
thank you, Dr. Kenneth. It was nice. We'll catch up soon again. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Take care.